Catherine, thank you for joining us on the August camp. Let's take a look at your butterfly for analysis here. So first of all, let's look at full speed over the water from side on. Now you have got a very nice fly already. You are sitting generally quite high in the water. I do think you could get more out of your fly though. There's a few points where I feel like we're just slipping water, so we're taking a few extra strokes than what you probably need to. And we're just parting the legs a little bit there as well. So that's the first thing that we're going to highlight here. I want you to be really conscious of making sure that you're not separating the legs too much, because obviously too far means you're going to start losing water through the middle of the legs. It also risks having an asymmetric kick, and obviously in fly we need symmetry. On this breakout stroke, really nice high elbow, but we are slipping wide with the palms. The palms are facing out and we want them to face down so that that press down gives you that lift up and onto the surface for your breakout. We spoke about looking for a 1, 2, 3 popping out of the water. So the 1 being your upper back, which is what you're getting here, which is lovely. 2 being the hips, which is very nearly there. It's very good, but I think it could just be that little bit better. And number 3 is going to be the heels. And we are getting those, but I want you to be conscious that I don't want you to get it by bending the knees too much. And we'll come to that later on. So what I want you to really focus on is the front of the stroke and what your hands are doing in particular. So if we take a look at this position here, you can see we're entering with the fingers pointing down. What I want you to think about is as you press the chest, I want you to get the palms facing down, not the fingertips, and reach at shoulder width. You can see what's happened here on that chest press is we've slipped out wide. So if you remember the drill we did near the start where we did the undulation with the skull to make sure that as you press your chest, the hands are coming into that shoulder width, that's going to be a good one for you to focus on. I like that you're recovering with a back of the hand because that means your shoulders are more relaxed, but I do want you to try and enter thumb down, maybe just outside shoulder width if you can, and then as you press the chest, move the hands to shoulder width and drive the palms downwards facing, because that's going to get you into a better position so that you're not slipping water at the front, you're not rushing the front of the stroke, and you can also then have that eye line at a good angle like you had there, but even easier because you're getting the lift from the hands at the front of the stroke instead. So if we take a look at that same length now, but from head on underwater. So what you can see here is quite a few air bubbles that you're taking with you. Now that indicates to me that you are rushing at the start of the stroke. You'll see that on any stroke where you've got to enter the water, so anything other than breaststroke basically, if there's air bubbles travelling with your hands, it means that we're not quite getting the smooth entry and that slight wait or pause before you pull for the air bubbles to leave. So at this point, this is that breakout stroke. You want your hands to be where those yellow lines are. So shoulder width, palms facing down. What you're doing by slipping outwards is almost offloading your shoulders and the tension that's going through your body. But what we actually want is the tension and the stretch in that body to be there so that it adds the elasticity and the power to that stroke and it helps to lift you onto the surface. If we're slipping wide and then you're focusing on what you've got, which is a really nice high elbow catch, that's great, but it's going to take a lot more muscle energy. So as we've mentioned, try and enter thumb down just outside shoulder width, then move into that shoulder width palm down position as you continue to press the chest. By having the palms as they are, that's causing you to rush. You're sort of digging into the water and your initial movement is then directed to slip. So we want to avoid that as much as possible. Keep the hands high on the surface for that touch longer, and getting the palms into the position that we're talking about here will help you to do that. Like I say, you are focusing on the high elbow catch, which is really, really nice. It's just that we're missing on the hands at the front. So almost like this is like I say, if you had that slight extra pause and reach at the front, it's not just a pause, it's a reach, then that would almost reduce your stroke count by probably about 2 each length, which is going to have quite a significant difference over, say, 100 fly. Those orange arrows, I'm just being a bit pedantic there, just keep the thumbs a little bit closer to the rest of the hand and you'd catch quite a bit more water there as well. It seems to happen that it opens up more on the right side, I think. So here's your second length of fly. I feel like we've lifted the head position a little bit when we're breathing compared to the first length here. So I don't know whether that's because there's a little bit of residual fatigue after that first length or not, but do be conscious of that. Your eye line was nice on the first length. We want to keep it there so it's angled slightly downwards as best we can. Now, you might have noticed there on the full speed that we're losing the rhythm on the kick. There's a lot more force and speed happening on the downbeat than there is on the upbeat. So we want to keep it like a metronome. We want to keep it a really even rhythm up and down. So really focus on the upbeat with a straight leg. That's your focus, because the downbeat will look after itself. So focus on the muscles at the back of the leg and the bum working, not the quads at the front. So as we've mentioned about that breakout, we need to alter that hand position to help bring you onto the surface. Try not to breathe on that first stroke as well. Those things combined are making it hard to get the hips from what starts off being a low position into that high position. So as we're seeing here, we're climbing quite a bit. We're on that yellow line, our body line. We want to aim to be on the purple line so that we can drop that eye line a little bit more. Remember, all your momentum, all your effort still wants to be going into moving forwards, even though we're undulating. It's just the rhythm of the body and the flow of that undulation that is going to be going up and down. But we don't want your arms and things like that to really be thinking about climbing you out of the water. Because as soon as, remember, we lift at one end, we drop at the other end. So we've got to really think about keeping that undulation going through the surface. What I do really like is that you're getting your head back down really nice and quickly after a breath. So that's not putting any stops to your stroke, which is great. Well done. Just think about, like on that previous point, entering a touch wider with that thumb down, like we've mentioned, and then moving into that shoulder width. Now here, I feel like this could be your last stroke. However, you take an extra little one and we end up sort of finishing with your nose nearly. So that makes it sort of a lot slower than if you would have just reached and stayed in a good streamlined position with the eyes down at that point. Now here's your side on view. So same length, but different angle. You see what I mean about that kick? We're kind of like putting a lot more effort, I think, into the downbeat, and then we're either floating up or just bending the knees ready for the next down kick. I want you to put the focus on the straight-legged upbeat of the kick. And with that, those legs as well, as you're coming off the wall, really nice streamline for the upper body here, but the legs are separated again, and you're just risking, like I say, separating the feet and getting the judges into a bit of a bad mood with that, and we don't want that. So use a little bit of an extra knee bend there that we could do without. We want to aim to have a maximum knee bend of around 120 degrees. That's what's the most efficient. And we can see there we're around 90. So this is what I'm talking about with the leg kick. Try not to get it from the quads, because your inclination then is to want to just bend the knees a bit too much. We just had a couple of pauses on the hands at the front there, because you can see sometimes it's not always the palms that face outwards, but we slice the water outwards, and we want to avoid doing that as well. Like I say, it's offloading the tension, and we spoke about having your body being like an elastic band. So from this position, which is a great position on this body line here, you want to encourage that stretch of that elastic band, not let it go too early like we're doing here, because that stretch is going to add power to your stroke. So you're not just using muscle to try and lift you and move you forwards. Your undulation is going to do the lifting, and just your hands being in the right position will do the lifting, but your focus is all on the momentum going forwards. So because we're losing that press down at the front and we're slipping or slicing a little bit wide, you're needing to lift your head to get that breath. If we had that lift more from the hands at the front, you would be able to get a breath without craning the neck quite so much. And then just lastly, like we spoke about there, make sure that the legs aren't just floating up and waiting for the next kick. Make sure the focus is on the upbeat, and it wants to be really rhythmical, even up and down on the beat of that kick. So like we saw on the Phelps and Cavic picture, being in a suboptimal position coming into the wall is going to lose you time. So we want to make sure that the eyes stay down and we stay as streamlined as possible and reached. So just a couple of visuals of Joe here, just to emphasise what I'm talking about and explain it hopefully a little bit better. You can see that eye line remains down quite well there, and his hips are getting a little bit higher. You can really see them popping out of the water there. We've got that 1, 2, 3. So that breakout stroke, okay, we want to make sure the palms are down. That lifts us. Here you can see Joe enters thumb down. So if you're doing anything over a 50, this is definitely something to think about. So his back coming out is the number 1, thinking about that hand entry. 2 is the hips, thinking about the stretch with the arms at the front and getting the palms down and into position at that point. And then the legs, you can see they're straight as those heels pop out the water. They're not bent. So all in all, he's quite high and that undulation is moving through the surface. If he was to lift his eye line more on these breaths, that would drop his hips and the back end of his body and encourage him to climb through the water. So it ends up becoming quite hard, feeling like you're swimming uphill. And we want to essentially feel like you're swimming downhill. So the head-on view here from Joe. So you can see in general there's less air bubbles on his hands that are travelling with him as he pulls. So that slight reach and weight therefore at the front means that the air bubbles can leave his hands, so all he's pulling is water. So here's that breakout stroke. You can see palms are facing backwards. Obviously he's going to be a bit wider than you because he's bigger, but we want to make sure that we're still getting into the right position for you. So thumbs down on the entry here, eyes are still down as well. Then as you're reaching, see he's at shoulder width but got into the palm down position just before getting ready to pull. So that is your full stretch position with the palms facing down, and that is where you have that slight, very slight pause, but I'd rather call it a reach. All right, so here's the underwater side-on shot. So Joe's rate of swimming is actually quite low. So he was a 200 fly swimmer predominantly. Obviously, if you're doing hundreds and things, you want to generally pick this rate up a little bit more than what you see in here. But if we slow it down for the purpose of highlighting some of the technical points we want to look at, you can see that you're getting a great position with that body line here. The difference being the hand position. So you can see that your palms have slipped out a bit wide. Joe's are still reaching forwards there. So from here, you can see that as we come up to breathe, there's not quite so much of a lift of the head and the eye line like we were talking about before. And coming into the wall, we really keep that stretch. So I hope that all makes sense. Here's some key points that we worked on throughout the camp, just as general ones to help remind you as well. But we hope that helps. Well done, Catherine. Really nice job. It was a pleasure having you on the camp, and hopefully we'll see you again. Well done.